All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and I'm really excited to have Todd Linder on. We're going to be talking about people looking to make a transition from ministry into the workplace, but a lot of the things we're going to be talking about go beyond people who are in a ministry position. But a lot of people over the last few years who are in teaching and they want to transition out of that, or people who have been in the military and they're looking to make that transition. And so even though the focus of today is really going to be on people who are trying to transition out of a ministry role, something like working for a church or being in a pastoral role or something like that. But a lot of what we're going to talk about really does apply to people who are looking to make any kind of career transition. And Todd has helped a bunch of people make the transition from ministry into the workplace and successfully repackage their skills to be paid what they're worth. So Todd, super excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, man, me too. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest things, and again, I've talked with teachers who run into the same thing, like exactly the same thing that I feel like a lot of ministry people run into. And that's they start feeling this tension, like, hey, I love what I do. I did this for a reason, but I'm getting burnt out. My family is suffering. My mental health is suffering because I'm constantly pouring myself out. And then I'm not really being compensated enough for what I'm doing for the sacrifice. And then, there's kind of these different challenges that come with that. So what are some of the signs that it might be time to make a transition out of ministry into the workplace?
Yeah, I think the tension you just described is, I think, just an important one to acknowledge as a step one, is acknowledging reality that you came into the work, whether that's teaching, whether that's ministry, could be someone coming out of the military. Some people get in the military because that's the option that they have. Some people get into the military because it's like a family thing. Some people get into the military because they believe it's a calling. Any position like that, where you get into a vocation because you feel like you're called to something higher, and then you start to feel a tension for what also is important in your life, and there's two things that are in conflict with each other. I think the most important thing to do is to notice that tension and to call out the reality of the situation. So often, and this is my personal story too, because I worked for a church in Atlanta. It was a pretty big church in Atlanta for 7 years before I made a transition into a marketplace job. Oh, I say marketplace, corporate job. Saying marketplace job is like a very ministry term for not ministry work. So I'm used to saying that to people, but into a company, the tension is tensions of guilt, tensions of shame, tensions of wondering if you're giving up on this call, tensions of family, tensions of finances. Are you going into more debt because you're not making enough and that debt is compiling? Yeah. So those things are real. And I think as a first step, when you feel those tensions, to not excuse them and to not say, oh, well, it is what it is. That's not a healthy response to that tension. And so just acknowledging it for what it is. And I think then having a conversation with a person who is going to be understanding and safe enough to not be like, what's wrong with you? You're wrong. Why would you ever give up on this? Like, look at all the good you're doing in the world. Yeah. That can really hold that tension with you. Be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And just start to work that out. I wish I had that person in my life. When you work for a pastor, so your pastor, the person who's supposed to be like your spiritual life guide, is also your boss. That's a hard dual role to hold from both sides. And so not having that person is can be part of the challenge sometimes. But long answer summarized, just when you feel the tension, acknowledge it, and that's going to be able to empower you to then make steps towards the solution, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that acknowledgement is huge. And another piece that you just brought up is, it might be a good idea to start building relationships with people outside of the church bubble, whatever church you're in. I mean, it could be a pastor from a different church, or could be might run into some trouble with that, but it might also just be some people who you respect outside of ministry, and start getting some input from a different group of people. Because when you're in that, depending on the church that you're in, that bubble can be very tight, and it can make it really difficult for you to get objective input on whether what you're feeling is like, everybody goes through ups and downs. Like, is this just a season where it's really tough and you just got to tough it out? Or, are you really seeing something where you're like, hey, might be time for me to do something different for a season, and getting some of that outside input can be invaluable. So what are some of the biggest reasons that people stay longer than they should, that you've seen?
Yeah, I have noticed, going back to what we just talked about, was almost excusing the tension because you're doing something that like requires this higher calling and sacrifice and a life of scarcity. And that's like more so like a cultural norm that in the Western church context, because in lots of other parts of the world, full-time vocational pastoring is not normal. It's like what you do in addition to your job. And so this is definitely a like contextual thing that we're living in, a contextual problem that we're living in for the time and the location in the world that for the people that I'm working with and the people that I talk to are. So I think that's just something to like call out, is that this is not like this is like what pastors do. That's not true across the board. That just might be like your situation in particular, or the culture you find yourself in, and kind of the groups that you run in. Because in every industry, like Joseph, you do a lot of marketing stuff. Like, lots of marketing people, right? But you may not engage with a lot of like consultants at the Big Four, right? And that's a whole, and you might, but that's a whole different culture that you run in, or Wall Street. Like, that's a whole different culture, right? So being aware of the culture that you're in and what's normal for your culture versus like what's actually normal in the world. It's important to be aware of that. And then I think a lot of it is just a lot of the spiritual questions, a lot of the shame associated. I hear all the time people saying like, well, I don't want to disappoint people, or I'm not sure if I'm giving up on God's call for my life that I felt when I was a freshman in college at such and such university in this campus ministry, or whenever they first felt like they were supposed to do ministry work. I think there's that. I have a mentor of mine who went to seminary, wanted to be a pastor, and what he would describe, he did not go to be a pastor. He started a business now that is does over $100 million a year in revenue. Wow. And what he described, the transition for him, was bad theology. And I know I'm going to like poke at some people when I say that, and it's not me saying that, it's him saying that. But what he was essentially saying is, he always thought the only way that I can do God's will and God's work is by being paid by a ministry. And he had this revelation, is like, that's not true. And I can actually do more ministry potentially not being paid in a church, which has been my personal experience actually. And so I think the mentality, cultural mentality, that like, this is the highest call. Why would you want to do anything else? We hear that in staff meetings. Why would we want to do anything else with our lives? Like, look at all the good we're doing, as if this is the best thing ever. And in reality, it is a good thing, could be a good thing, but also could be really harmful to your relationships, to your health. And I go to church. I love going to church. I am very good friends with one of my pastors. But at the same time, it's like, there's some environments where that's very healthy and some environments where it's not. because
Yeah.
it's a human institution. I think one of the interesting tensions is also understanding, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, maybe a helpful frame is who decides what your vocational calling is? Is it God, or is it the investors in your organization, or the giving, or whoever's in charge of getting the money? Because we've seen a lot of churches go through layoffs. And that's an interesting topic to broach internally for yourself is, what if I got laid off? Would that mean that my calling is ended? Or
Hmm.
does that mean that someone else is dictating my calling? And I think that just is a good thing to think about if you're wondering if you're staying too long, if you're around too long. Just think who's really keeping me here and who really dictates my vocational ministry calling.
Yeah, there's a couple things that you shared there that I think will really be relatable for people. I mean, for one, for me, I had that same experience. I'm not running $100 million business yet, but same experience where I kind of, just from the way I grew up, it was like, hey, if you're really going to serve God's kingdom, then you become a pastor, and that's what like the really people who really love God are going to do. And then then there's all the other people who go do normal stuff, and it's not necessarily that anybody said that out loud. I can't really I can't like pinpoint an exact time where somebody said that. I wouldn't be surprised if they did,
Yeah.
but it's more the unspoken thing. And what I've learned over the last 15 years since I really made the decision not to go that route is it's just not true. Like there's so much opportunity to do ministry, to connect with people, to build relationships outside, and in fact, it could be keeping you from building the most important relationships, and even being able to relate with people, like having your neighbors into your house. Are you going to be able to relate with them at all? Because if they're working and they're doing normal life things that normal people do, and you've never done anything like that, then it can be kind of hard to relate to them, have a true understanding of what they're going through and the challenges of having a bad boss, or being in a really I mean I won't go there, but yeah, I think that's really relevant. But then I think this also applies to people who are in a bad job as well. And I've also been in a job where you where it just wasn't a good fit anymore, and there's that similar pressure. There can be, depending on the culture that you're in your workplace, where you feel like, oh, I'm the only person who can do this, or you feel connected to your colleagues, or you feel there's some kind of reciprocity where you feel like you owe your boss something or whatever, and it can keep you in a really bad job or a really toxic job way longer than you should be there. And I think it's kind of a similar thing. Like if you're feeling those things, um, you know, and then you get laid off, you're going to realize they actually didn't need me. They actually, and if your identity is wrapped up in your work, whether it's work or it's ministry, I think ministry it's even more challenging in a lot of ways, because there's work identity and then there's spiritual identity that are wrapped up in the same thing, right? So there's a little bit more there, but at the same time, I think it's kind of a similar idea where, um, if trust me, if you leave, they're going to find somebody else to do what you're doing, and they're going to move on with their life. And the people that you used to do life with every single day, they're hardly going to remember you in a month or two or 5 or 6. And in
Yeah.
2 or 3 years, chances are nobody that you worked with, whether it was at church or in a working environment, are going to remember you. And if they do, you'll stay connected with those people and you'll have a great relationship, and they'll follow you, into your next thing. And so the relationships that are really meaningful will stay, and the ones that aren't, they're not as meaningful as you have it in your head.
Yeah. And that's so true. And that's you brought up a really good point in vocations where there is some sort of calling and some sort of camaraderie, and you're doing something that's bigger than yourself together. That's also your community in so many ways, because you're doing something that so many other people, they like don't quite understand what you've put into this, especially in ministry. It's not 9 to 5. You might be in an office 9 to 5, but you could get a call, someone could drop by your home, and you are obligated, maybe not like in your job description, but obligated like in the Bible to care for that person because you are being paid. And that can cut into lots of other parts of life. But even in normal jobs, it's really important to say, okay, what is the priority here? Is it my marriage for those who are married? Like, is my marriage suffering and can I correlate that to the job? Are my relationship with my kids, if you have kids, is that suffering?
Yeah.
Is my physical health suffering? Like, am I going to live fewer years of life because of the stress that's accumulating or because of the bad habits that are accumulating? And it can start with stress, but there's plenty of instances where there's like too much stress and it's turned into alcoholism or other sorts of addiction that have then disqualified people from ministry when they probably just should have said early on, this is not a good fit for me. This is not
Yeah.
healthy. And I either need to change the way I'm working or change my work completely. And I think we see way too many people get into that, like, oh, we can't come back from this type of environment, or we can't get back. And some are very public, most are very private, but that's definitely a concern that I have when I'm talking to someone of how are you going to be on this journey later? And that's not my specialty. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm a coach. But that is definitely part of the discernment conversation is this aligning to your priorities? And is this aligning to the vision of where you want to be in the future? And if it's not, we need to figure out that gap and how do we close the gap between your vision and reality? And we might need to make some changes.
Yeah, when you're in a role that's very emotionally taxing, no matter what it is, you have to be aware of burnout, and because it happens pretty much no matter what when you're in a uh, very emotionally taxing role, and pretty much most ministry roles have a pretty high degree of uh, emotional drain on you as an individual person, and where is that
Mhm.
going to manifest itself? And if you're not thinking about that and really working through that, you can go too long and really really burn yourself out, and then you're going to end up at some point, if you're starting to experience burnout and you don't face it and deal with it, whether that's saying, hey, I need to do something different, or you know get help and work through the things I need to work through, um, you're going to end up having to transition anyway, just because you've become so unhealthy that your life blows up and explodes, rather than dealing with it a little bit earlier and saving yourself and the people that you love a lot by not dealing with it. And yeah,
Mhm.
my wife and I run an organization in Kenya, and um, we've really had to be on top with our staff there of being like, hey, are you guys taking enough time off, and like forcing them to take time off, and then like really putting it, hey, you guys need somebody else to come work on your team to take some of these things off your plate. And they pushed back on us for a long time, and finally we're like, no, we need to hire somebody to come take this off your plate, because we could start seeing those signs of burnout on with our team. And
Yeah.
even the most amazing even the most amazing people who are dedicated to the work and they love what they're doing, um, they get burned out. And as an individual, if your team, I mean, in an ideal world, you're going to be working at a place where your team is going to see that and they're going to be proactively helping you with that. That's not always the case, and I might go as far as to say that's not very often the case in a ministry role, where your team's going to be really looking out for you from a burnout perspective and making sure that you have the tools that you need. And in that case, you kind of need to be doing that on your own. Okay, so I want to transition, because we spent a lot of time talking about that, and I want to get into the practical piece, which I think is another area where people get stuck. They go, okay, well, my calling, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. There's all the all the things that we've talked about, from shame and all of that. But then there's this other huge piece, which is, I've never worked in a marketplace role before, or I haven't done that in 10 years or 15 years, and I've been doing ministry. I haven't been doing marketing or sales, or I haven't been an executive at a
Mhm.
big company or whatever the case is. And so there's this huge gap between um, where they think that they have to enter into the marketplace. Like, so what are some practical ways that people can think about reframing the skills that they have acquired in ministry and kind of repackaging those to show the value that they're going to bring in a corporate or marketplace role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is one of the two like major questions that I get, and they're kind of wrapped together is what in the world would I do next? Because I've only ever hung out with students, like high school kids, or I've only ever talked from a stage, or I've only ever played a guitar and sang. So, like, what job would I do? And then, even if I did know that, how would I explain? Because I've done other things, but most people think that I've only done this. Like, if someone sees worship pastor, they're like, great. So the guitar man is going to come like help us with our marketing. Like what's good?
Right.
But really they've done so much more. So this is where we break down. Step one is to understand what the job you're looking for next is that aligns with the skills or experience that you have. And so an example could be somebody, we have somebody in our coaching group who is what's called a connections pastor. And so this person, their job is to meet all the new people that come to the church. And they have a little connection card. So if you've ever been to a church before, there's like a card in the back of the seat or on your seat or something. And if you're new, you fill it out, you drop it in the bucket, whatever, or you scan a QR code, type in your info, and then someone might reach out to you or text you or something like that. That's the connections pastor. And so their job is to basically connect with all the new people, get to know them, get to know their story, and then try to get them come back the next Sunday. Oh, we think like you got kids. Our kids has an event. Oh, you got this thing. You're newly married. We have a newly married thing, and just get them like plugged into more things. And then eventually that person becomes consistent. They meet their community there. They love it. And then eventually they become a thriving member of this church and give money. That's not the point, but that is generally what happens. And what I was explaining to him, I was like, you are in sales.
Yeah.
Functionally, functionally, that's what you do. And this is the word that's important is what's the function of the job? The
Yeah.
function of the job for this person and anybody else who's like that is to meet with the people that say hello for the first time, like I'm interested in your thing, and just create relationship and connection with them until they decide that this is the thing for them and this is the thing that solves their problem. I'm like, dude, this is what's called working someone through a funnel.
Yeah.
And you're just in like this is sales, what you do.
Yep.
And so it's important to understand functionally, like you may feel like your job is completely different. Or if you're in the military, like infantry, like who else does the infantry stuff? Or teacher, like a third grade teacher, like who else is doing that stuff? Well, no one else is on the front lines of battle. No one else is in a third grade classroom. But the functions of what you do are actually very similar to other jobs out there. It's just identifying what are the functions around those jobs. So that's for
Yep.
sales, or I think somebody who is like a worship director who has to get the band set up and plan the set list with the different songs and then make sure that it's flowing with the entire event. It's like, well, you could be an event planner because you basically plan the whole event, or you could be
Right.
a project manager because you're delegating and moving so many parts around and have to make sure that
Yeah.
all the details are all together at the right time. And you're probably using some sort of software to do that and holding all these details in your mind, and you have to execute on it every single week. That's project managers do very, very similar things functionally. So understanding number one, what job can you do functionally based off of your experience. And then number two, it's just translating that like churchy's language or the education language into marketing lingo or sales lingo or whatever that is. And there are multiple ways you can do that. Now we have AI that very, very easily can give you like a baseline of how to
Yeah.
do that. Is you could ask AI and say, give me all of the functions of someone who is in a tech sales job. And then you can look at that and say, okay, I am this position right here. Where is there crossover? And don't trust AI for everything because it's really just a lot of mathematical algorithms that's just guessing. It's just like a really, really good guesser. That's all AI is. But it can still like get you started and then go talk to somebody who's in that job.
Yeah.
Ideally, someone who's been in ministry before and is now in that job. And that's super easy to find those people on LinkedIn. But go talk to someone you know or someone who used to work at your church and no longer works at your church and saying like, okay, so you used to do this, now you do this. How would you explain what you did? How would you explain what I did? And that person, one, is going to be a safe place because they've made the transition, probably felt a
Yeah.
lot of the same internal conflict you have. But two, they can actually really help you and tell you like, oh, yeah. So I've been doing this now for 3 years. So I know exactly how you would explain this into this. It's just reaching out to someone and saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Can you help me? And they'll help you get 50, 60, 70% of the way there.
Yeah, and I love how you reframe those positions because I feel like so many positions in that so many ministry positions translate super well to sales or marketing. I mean, they're basically like you're doing a lot of the same stuff. In fact, a lot of people who are in ministry roles, I think, are actually probably better at doing that than a lot of people who have been in marketing their whole life because you're doing it in a very like you get very quick feedback on what you're doing from your audience and you get to actually talk to the people in the audience regularly, right? So you get
Yeah.
feedback on how you did on the video announcements, or you learn how to talk in front of people and get on stage, and you learn how to communicate ideas succinctly. But almost no matter what role you're in, you're going to be interfacing with people all the time.
Yeah.
You're going to be dealing with people in high stress situations. You're going to be dealing, having to de-escalate situations, and that those things apply so much to sales and marketing. And a couple roles with that would be like event marketing is a perfect fit for a lot of different ministry roles because you're going to helping to plan an event, like setting up the booth, planning the booth, creating the graphics for that or whatever, depending on the role, coordinating with everybody, actually getting there, setting up the booth. And then you're meeting people, you're talking to people, you're building relationships. And then, to your point, then you're managing who does this person now need to connect with within our company. And then you're making that connection. And then you're following up with both people to make sure that
Nailed
actually
it.
happened, right? And you're following it all the way through. And, you're building those relationships. And those are all skills that somebody who's been in a ministry role almost definitely already has. It's just a matter of figuring out, what is it that you get excited about. And I mean, another one would be like what I'm in which is podcasting. There's so many different elements of what you do in launching podcasts and producing podcasts that are very similar to ministry roles. Again, like learning how to take an idea and communicate it clearly. If you've been in counseling people, learning how to ask open-ended questions to get people to talk and share what's going on. Those are all really important. Or customer research would be another one where if you've done counseling, you could do customer research, market research, where you just go talk to people and get them to open up about things that they wouldn't normally talk to a salesperson about, and get them to tell you what's wrong in their life, what are the pain points and problems that they're experiencing, and then figuring out ways to help connect them with the right people, or how to message what you're doing to help resolve the pain that people are actually experiencing. And to me, those are all things that most ministry roles you could just step almost right into, like a little bit of lingo change, a little bit of reframing that, but you've already done customer research. That's if you've been in a pastoral role, you've done that.
Yeah.
You've done all the same things that you would do for customer research.
And this takes us back to the very beginning. What we were saying is get out of the bubble, get out of just this like just the cyclone of like everyone's kind of saying the same thing, doing the same thing. And that just could mean like go join a gym with people who you don't work with, or go work out of a co-working space and start meeting people, or like don't go hang out at all the places where all the people you already hang out with hang out. Go to these different I remember when I was working for a church, I did two things that kind of helped me with this. I joined a Bible study with no one that went to my church, meeting at another church, which probably I could have gotten in trouble with for, but meeting in another church, and every single guy in that Bible study was a business leader. Somewhere in insurance, somewhere in real estate, somewhere, I mean, they were all over the place. Some were entrepreneurs, some were commercial real estate. It's just all over the place. And I learned so much about the world of work through them. And then I was in a workout group with a bunch of guys. None of them, I don't think, even went to church. But they're all business leaders. And so just hearing them talk about work, and I just got exposed from multiple angles to different parts of work. And I built relationships with people who cared about me because I was around a lot. And I could openly say, hey, I'm thinking about what's next. Can you help like guide me? And it was a really helpful way for me to start thinking about the future and see how they were living their lives and how they could do ministry even outside of, even in their corporate 9-to-5s and all that. It was so getting out of that bubble, just getting into that other space. And that's going to be super, super helpful to just start building those relationships.
So yeah, I'd love to hear a story of somebody that you've walked alongside to make that transition from ministry into the workplace, and then the impact that had on them as a person, but also on their family.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll start by saying that there's probably like two primary reasons that we encounter people leaving ministry. One is to really like redeem time with their family, and the other is for financial reasons, because they're in debt, or they're living paycheck to paycheck, or they're looking ahead and they're realizing I'm not going to be able to send my kids to college or leave anything for them, and that's not the life I want to live. So a lot of it has to do with family and finances. And so there's a couple people in particular that I think about. One guy was a lead pastor at a church, probably like 200-300 people, so not like a huge church. And he, his daughter was having mental health issues, in and out of the hospital because of her mental health issues. And from an emotional standpoint, could not, for the health of his family, could not basically like pastor his family and pastor his congregation. So he had to take a step back from that. But the only job he could find was a part-time job leading like tours, like as a tour guide. And so he ended up having like when we started talking, he had like a 4-month runway before they're out of money, didn't have insurance, 4 kids, mortgage. And he had an amazing community that was around him, and we ended up being able to get him a job in about 50 days.
Wow.
But part of that was that he increased his salary by $50,000, and he lowered his work time to only be 9 to 5, and then doing some like salesy type account management stuff, like going to events and stuff like that, but truly 9 to 5. Enough flexibility to be with his daughter as she was like coming in and out of therapy and recovery. And he still gets to preach at the church that he was at. So he still gets to do what he felt like he was made to do. He's getting to actually be present with his hurting family, and he's making more money with better insurance to take care of his daughter. And so it's like the possibilities are still there for that. There's another guy I'm thinking about who worked for a missionary organization, making probably like $45,000 a year, 2 kids, one on the spectrum, just a lot of it's a challenge with anything compared to just having like healthy kids.
Yep.
And they wanted to be closer to family. They were in debt, and he ended up getting a tech sales role that his first big commission check was almost double his salary.
That's amazing.
And literally that in itself completely eliminated all of the debt
Wow.
for their family.
That's amazing.
And so it's stuff like that where it's like, and this dude is thriving. He's healthier than he's ever been. He's crushing his job. And he meets with people every single week who are trying to transition out of ministry. And he's ministering to them with the free time that he has because of how successful he is in the role that he's in.
It's amazing.
And he's gonna, I think this year he's probably gonna make close to 4x what he was making before annually.
That is amazing.
So maybe more than that. So it's the opportunities for ministry and I know there's a whole scarcity thinking and a whole like giving of yourself thinking, and I'm not necessarily against any of that. But I do think that when financial burdens are released and time flexibility is increased, the potential for living in the freedom to do meaningful work in your work and outside of work hours just blossoms.
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over. I've got so many stories like that. Those are just like 2 immediate ones that I can think about.
Yeah. I love that. And I've seen similar things for folks also transitioning out of ministry. It really can, and it doesn't mean that you're not doing ministry. Life is ministry. And when you're actually doing life with people who aren't in a bubble, then you get opportunities for all kinds of interesting ministry things that you maybe didn't even realize existed. And you can really have a huge impact. I know one thing that when somebody wants to come volunteer with our organization who hasn't actually like lived in Kenya, done something on the ground, been part of what we're doing, if they're like a young person and they're coming to me, I'm like, I don't really have anything that you can do. Like, what skills do you have? Whereas if somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I've been doing marketing and I want to come help you guys with your social media, I'm going to be like, sweet, sounds great. Like, I would love your help. Or, somebody comes to me and they go, hey, I do sales and I would love to work with you guys on getting bigger fundraising people coming in, and I've got some free time. I want to help you with that. I'd be like, sweet, that's awesome. But somebody comes and they don't have those skills. What are you even going to do to help me? I'm going to spend more time trying to figure out something for you to do. So in other words, like when you make those transitions, you're going to gain a skill set that has serious value to your church or the ministry you were working for, or a different ministry, or mission organization, or whatever it is. That can really do, it can go a super long way compared to if you're coming in trying to do ministry and you don't have that practical experience. It's really hard to be able to step in and help. Cool. So when I was going to ask you another question here, but I think we'll just wrap up because this has been a great conversation. We're rolling pretty deep here, and I want to give you a chance to tell people about how they can work with you. So yeah, tell me about how you're helping people specifically transition out of ministry and how they can find out more about you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Joseph. So we, as you can probably tell, we help people transition from ministry jobs into marketplace jobs, really without getting overlooked because of your experience, doing a job that you want that's actually going to support your family. So those are really like the 3 things that we really hone in on. And so there's 2 ways that we help people. If you are listening to this and you are in one of 2 places, you're in this place of, I just, I don't know if I want to transition out of ministry. I kind of like trying to figure this out. It feels lonely, or I don't feel like I'm getting much traction. I feel stuck. Or I think I do, but what's really holding me back from even making a decision right now is I don't even know what I would want to do next. We have, and we do this like once a month, about a job clarity intensive day. And so it's a full day of coaching. It's on a Friday because most people in church don't work on Fridays. So it's full day on a Friday. It's going to be September 12th this time around. And we're going to coach on vision, where you're at right now, how to close that gap, and then actually get the job titles that would fit you by the end of that time. So it's going to include our in-house built job clarity assessment that is specifically for people with a ministry background. It's going to take into consideration not just your skills, your experience, your wiring, but also that vision, also your personal values, what's important to you about work. We'll put it all together, and you're going to walk away with a list of titles that actually fit you and you can actually get hired for. And we've done that based off of researching thousands of transitions on LinkedIn. So gone on LinkedIn and found who's been in ministry, where have they landed, so we know you're not just like getting a random job. So that's that day, September 12th. And one of our North Stars is trying to make top tier coaching as accessible for people as possible, transitioning out of ministry. So that is very accessible financially. It's like 5 hours of coaching. It's $149. It's very, very accessible. The other person, if you're saying, okay, I know I want to transition out of ministry, I'm actively trying to do this, I want to get into more interviews faster, I'm having trouble translating my experience, I'm having trouble getting into interviews, that's where Interview Accelerator is going to be the right fit for you. And so that's a 90-day cohort. So we start with the Job Clarity Intensive. So everyone starts on that day, September 12th. And we're going to walk with you and a whole other group of people who are in the same scenario as you through every step of the process, starting with job clarity, translating your experience, building your resume, LinkedIn, cover letters, building out your story, your elevator pitch. If you run into someone randomly in the coffee shop and they're saying, hey, like, what's going on? You have the exact phrasing to help them help you. Then what organizations are more likely to hire you because of your ministry background, seeing that as an asset rather than as a liability. We're going to help you find those, help you get into the right conversations with the right people, help you convert those conversations into interviews, win in the interviews, and even negotiate your offer. And so there's a lot of great tools and resources and community. We have weekly group calls, all sorts of stuff that's going to be really helpful for you in that. So the Interview Accelerator is the thing that can help you there. So depending upon where you're at in your scenario, in your situation, one of those two things. And then if you're just kind of exploring, we do have a newsletter that I spend a lot of time on every single week, just getting super, super tactical on just really practical stuff that you can do right now to change your job search and get better results.
Awesome. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Really appreciate it. And lots of good, helpful tips for people looking to make that transition. And yeah, for everybody tuning in, we'll see you on the next live.
Thanks, Joseph.